Crew Chief is the first perk deck in the list, and the one that is selected by default. Originally thought of as the noob deck, Crew Chief has become really popular over the past couple years. Though, I have to break a secret to you before I start the video. I don't really care for the deck.
You didn't mean that.
I'll get into why later, but let's just talk about what the deck offers first. Crew Chief, like the name implies, is a deck that buffs your crew. However, it also buffs you, and honestly, probably more than it should. Crew Chief is an obnoxiously strong deck, especially compared to the other support decks. Crew Chief just gets the best of both worlds with incredible buffs to himself and to others. Let's start with the simpler buffs and then move towards the stranger ones. The players using Crew Chief will get 20% more health, and everyone else will get 10% more health. I don't really think I need to explain this, it's pretty straightforward. The next buff is that the player using Crew Chief gets 10% more armor, and everyone else will get 5% more. Also pretty straightforward. The player using Crew Chief will get a longer shout distance, which I guess is helpful for dominating enemies further away, but this isn't something game-changing. It doesn't change the range you can inspire from, and it doesn't change the range that NPCs like Matt can move from, so who really cares? The next buff is one that every player gets, and that's 50% more stamina. Stamina in this game is used for sprinting and sprint jumping, but at least on Death Sentence, you never really sprint for extended periods of time. So this can help out occasionally, but it isn't something massive either. Damage resistance is the most effective way to lower damage from enemies on Death Sentence, and Crew Chief has a fair amount of it. The third card of Crew Chief will tell you that you gain 6% resistance, but that's just untrue. You will in fact gain 8%. That's not the only 8% boost either, as the entire team gets 8% resistance. This resistance also has an interesting bonus that when you're below half health, you get 16% instead of 8. This doesn't apply to other players though. Even that isn't the end of the damage resistance on Crew Chief, as having at least one hostage will add another 8%. Total, this means you have about 26% resistance, or 35% resistance when you're below half health. However, the buffs don't end there, as you can take more hostages. For every hostage you take, you and your team will gain 12% more stamina. Again, nothing super exciting, but note that this only goes up to 4 hostages, meaning that combined with the other stamina boost, your team will have about double the stamina. The final boost is also hostage related, in which every hostage up to 4 will give an additional 6% health to your team. This perk works similar to the skill Partners in Crime, which says that you'll get 30% more health. However, both of these will only scale off of the base player health, which is 230. This is why Partners in Crime will give you 69 additional health, no matter if you're playing Anarchist with a smaller health pool, or Stoic with a larger health pool. Likewise, 6% additional health translates to 13.8 health per hostage, and 55.2 when you have 4 hostages. As you can see, despite not being super complex, Crew Chief just comes with an overwhelming amount of buffs. However, before you think about just using a 4-player team of Crew Chiefs, I will have to tell you that the crew abilities don't stack. That said, Crew Chief combos into other decks beautifully. Since Crew Chief gives so many health-related buffs, one idea to explore is Stoic. With ICTV and a Convert, Stoic will have 520 health, but if you consider maximum Crew Chief buffs, it shoots up to almost 610. However, with the Crew Chief resistance and how Stoic works, you can actually face tank 12 shots without flasking. Obviously, Crew Chief combos into more decks than just Stoic. Since every deck gets an armor boost, all ICTVs will have natural 2-shot. There are also decks that get more specific bonuses, but I'll leave those for you to discover and just get on with the builds. Ladies, gentlemen, and children of all ages, which is probably the category most of you fall into, I present to you my build reliant on team play. It has no Inspire, no Jack of all trades, no weapons that can provide supporting fire, and aside from upgraded converts, nothing team-oriented, really. But hey, I brought dock bags, that's good, right? Alright, yeah. Whatever. There aren't many team-oriented elements here, but who cares? Crew Chief is strong enough. I'm sure we're all stakeout enjoyers, so I won't go over it, and I'll just move on to why I dislike Crew Chief. Wait, you guys aren't stakeout enjoyers? Oh, okay. The Stakeout is a great shotgun that is outclassed. Ever since the VT-12's release, the Stakeout is more or less obsolete. It used to compete with the Yzma for when you're playing unconcealed, but not really anymore. I don't particularly care, it looks great, has one of the best firing sounds in the game, and performs well enough. People should give the Stakeout more of a chance. Anyway, let's get into why I dislike Crew Chief. I have several reasons which I'll reveal throughout the video, but let's start with actually playing the deck. Through my eyes, Crew Chief plays almost identically to another deck in this game, Muscle. Aside from the team boosts, the only differences are that Muscle heals faster and Crew Chief has free 2-shot armor. However, Muscle should really be used with first aid kits to get that 2-shot armor while also dealing with green dozers. So let's just assume the exact same build on Muscle and Crew Chief. Muscle with a Convert and Hostage Taker will heal a heavy shot in 30 seconds. Crew Chief with just a Convert will heal the same shot in 50 seconds. However, even assuming you have 4 hostages, you'll still only heal in 45 seconds. You can see how Muscle is just a much more aggressive Crew Chief. There's nothing wrong with more passive playstyles, I quite like them in fact. However, that will lead into my second issue with Crew Chief, which I'll give you in the next build. Although I mentioned one of the strengths of Crew Chief is the innate 2-shot armor, I didn't actually use ICTV last time. The LBV with all the Crew Chief boosts is good enough to deal with lights and even shields, so I used it there to get more concealment. But that aside, here's a build to get the most out of the deck. The Pronghorn is a neat gun that was popular for all of 5 hours and then no one ever used it again. However, it hits the breakpoints I want, so I used it here. You've all played more than enough primary sniper rifles, don't even deny it. The Pronghorn is nothing amazing, but it's good enough to keep you on your toes, especially since it has the ammo conservation of a 500. I find it to be more engaging, but it does come with the downside of losing out on a secondary SMG. You could go with primary Akimbo SMGs of course, but I didn't really want to, so the next best thing was Akimbo revolvers. You could go for any revolver here really, the Broncos are just my choice. Parabellums, broomsticks, and Igors all exist and will do better, but as long as a minigun dozer doesn't have his faceplate, just magdupping the Broncos will kill it as long as you have high value target active. And that's good enough. Basically, you have full power to make this build more generic if you want. Anyway, my second issue with Crew Chief. Crew Chief doesn't really require you to do anything. Unlike the other support decks like Gambler and Maniac, Crew Chief more or less requires you to just exist. You don't even need to do the whole hostage thing for the deck to do its job. If you play other support decks passively, you're just going to be useless. If you hide in a corner with Crew Chief, well, you're still going to be helping the team. The deck encourages an extremely boring playstyle, even among other passive playstyles. Maybe you expected something like this. Given that Crew Chief is the first deck, you might as well pair it with the first weapons. Although the stigma of this deck being a noob-only deck is basically gone, at least in the Death Sentence community, you may still fool a person or two. The weapons are really the important parts of this build, but don't really expect a whole lot of them. Yeah, the Amcar isn't bad when you set it up properly, but it's nothing amazing. The Shimano has no real use here. I didn't take any skills for it, and you'll only resort to it when you run out of Amcar ammo. You may have noticed a distinct lack of hostage taker on this build, and that's honestly not as worrying as you may think. When I first saw someone playing Suit Crew Chief without hostage taker many years ago, I was pretty shocked. But that person did originally inspire me to start breaking the rules of standard building. As long as you have a convert and play carefully, you'll be fine. You can still take 2 heavy shots to your health bar, at which point I suggest just using a first aid. But if you feel like you're in a worrying health position, you can just use a first aid anyway. You have plenty. Let's go over my third issue with Crew Chief. Yes, Crew Chief does help everyone in one way or another. However, and this is a very big however, there are some players who you just can't help. For every competent player you turn immortal, you'll find a new player who just isn't impacted. You can think about Crew Chief assistance as a bell curve, where it doesn't really help new players, and experienced players don't need it. If you really think you're helping everyone on the team every time you play Crew Chief, I'm sorry, but you have your head in the clouds. If you truly want to help everyone on the team, then consider something as simple as playing with a saw. Finishing objectives faster is an objective help to the team that nobody can complain about. Doors and gates are a pain, so just get rid of them. Another idea would be playing a support build where you can lock down an area with Fire Trap C4. That'll make the location safer for your team at the cost of your own deployable. Weakening yourself for the sake of the team is something I find much more interesting than just playing a generic build. Hell, sometimes even just dropping the support and building yourself up more is going to be more helpful than playing Crew Chief. Some players just can't be helped, at which point you just need to put on the big boy pants and solve all the team's problems alone. Depending on how long you've been watching this channel, you may or may not know what this build is referencing. Roughly 2 years ago, I made a meme video making fun of the build templates that were suggested in the Payday the Heist subreddit Discord. Among many other awful decisions, the template for Crew Chief had Frenzy in it. Let's start with the first thing that needs to be said. There's nothing inherently wrong with Frenzy Crew Chief. However, it does not belong in a fucking template. A template is the basic form of something, and I can assure you that Frenzy Crew Chief is absolutely wrong as a template. Crew Chief has the powerful ability to take 2 health shots, and Frenzy cuts that. But alright, whatever. Everyone who has a high level of game sense will automatically tell you that playing 3-shot ICTV Crew Chief is not worth it. Saying something is one thing, and actually testing it is another. How many of you have actually tried Frenzy Crew Chief? Yeah, I thought so. I figured I could run through the footage I have recorded and check how effective the 3-shot was. So that's what I did for this biker heist footage that you're seeing. How many times do you think the 3-shot armor procced over the course of 19 minutes of gameplay? Hard to make a guess? Alright, I'll give you some options. So, do you have your answer? Well, you're wrong, because I lied and it's none of these. It procced a total of 2 times. Fucking twice, over the course of roughly 20 minutes. Wanna see it happen? Here's the first. Here's the second. The second one barely even counts because I died anyway, but to be fair, this situation was hopeless and anyone looking at it can tell you that. ICTV and 2 flashes is just not enough to cross this distance, and obviously I knew that as well. But I can't just sit there forever, right? So overall, spending 28 points on Frenzy and 4 on Underdog Aced helped me a grand total of once over about 20 minutes of gameplay. every other time my armor was broken, it just took 2 heavy shots. I don't know if the templates ever got changed, but I know when I suggested changes for basically every template, they were just rejected. Theory and practice in this game are different, and when you see something like Frenzy Crew Chief being unironically offended, well, it's just a sign that whoever is saying that has never actually tested the idea. But let's take a look at what you gain from Frenzy, namely Berserker. Crew Chief has an interesting setup in which you can get true 100% Zerk. I mentioned it once in a Crook build, but almost every Zerk you see that has 100% is actually 99. Info HUDs seem to show everything under 0.5 health as 100, but it doesn't actually truly double your damage. I don't exactly know where the game will truly double your damage, but this setup will reach less than 0.1 health, and the game seems to just consider that true 100. So how do you achieve this setup? Well, it's quite simple. Step 1, take a convert. Step 2, take 3 additional hostages. Step 3, get shot by a heavy. Easy. No, it's not fucking easy. You may have noticed that I haven't switched off this biker heist footage yet, when I usually showcase 2 or 3 maps. That's because getting this Zerk to work took me 4 fucking games. The first 2 games I played were ruined by a civilian getting freed mid-Zerk. The third game was ruined by underdog proccing, which made high Zerk but not 100. The most egregious game was the 4th one, in which my Zerk was ruined by a new player using forced friendship aced of all fucking things. And if I don't have the correct Zerk, well, what's the fucking point, right? But the cavity doesn't even need 100. Just getting shot by a light unit in your base form is literally enough. So why did I do this to myself? Why did I do any of this to myself? Nobody will play these builds anyway, right? I just do this to dance in front of the audience. Is my suffering worth it? You like my singing and now you want to watch me dance? Is that it? Oh yeah, I guess it's worth mentioning the Chicago typewriter. You could swap it out for an AK Gen and it'll be straight up better, but you could also just not play as Zerk Crew Chief, so, you know. The one big issue with the typewriter is the reload, but you can just get a headshot with the cavity and then swap for aggressive reload, so it's not that big a deal. Alright, off the deep end we go. We know that 3-shot ICTV is a pointless and consistent waste, but what about CTV? Well, getting 2-shot CTV with Crew Chief is actually pretty easy. If you want to, you can get rid of Frenzy Aced. Your 2-shot will still exist. However, if you remember the detail from the last build that getting shot by a heavy will actually not kill you, you can see why I have Hostage Taker. An interesting little tidbit is you technically regenerate faster from heavy shots by doing this. Now, another thing you can do is get rid of Iron Man. Again, you'll still have 2-shot. However, that will require all of Crew Chief's boosts to be active. It's not necessarily difficult for all the boosts to be active, and you need them to survive a shot to your health anyway, but I was concerned about potentially just losing out on 2-shot armor and the health shot simultaneously and then dying on accident. Might as well just use Suit at that point, right? But hey, give it a go if you want, and report the results in the comments. Maybe I'll make some bi-weekly build for it, but who knows. Now, since the health will regenerate faster, there is a theoretical build here that holds power. Grab the 3-shot ICTV from last game and combine it with Hostage Taker, and you can technically have 3-shot armor and a faster regenerating health shot than those playing base Crew Chief. However, I hope the lesson has been learned that theory is not practice, and considering the unreasonable point cost to actually pull that off, yeah, it's not as exciting as it may seem. I could go over the weapons, but come on, it's triple SMG. Playing it is simple enough, and although the Krinkovs are slightly tougher to conserve ammo on, just tap fire and you'll be fine. Since the last build section dragged on long enough, I didn't go over my final reason as to why I dislike Crew Chief, so I'll give it to you now. All the other reasons were when I play Crew Chief, but this one is when someone else is playing Crew Chief. From the bell curve idea I presented earlier, I'm on the side where I don't need Crew Chief. However, not only do I not need Crew Chief, I don't want Crew Chief. If you noticed by the builds I commonly play, I like to play stuff that is tougher to use than just the common builds you'll find in public games. In the words of Mr. Pronka, shooting yourself in the foot means you can shoot enemies too. When games get too boring, I just stop playing. This doesn't necessarily have to be from Crew Chief, but just in general, I hate strong teams. Additionally, Crew Chief is notorious for messing up Zerk methods. Crew Chief gives buffs that are quite strong, and there's no choice to not get them. I, of course, have a mod that permanently shuts them off, so I don't really care anymore. But for a long time, I had to deal with buffs that I didn't want. Even in custody, the effects of Crew Chief work, but you want to know something even goofier? You can get Crew Chief effects without a Crew Chief even in your game. I won't go into the details here, but I'll link a video by KevKilled in the description explaining this bug. Although I don't like Crew Chief, he does. He's made lots of Crew Chief related content, and I'd honestly even credit the community opinion turning from Crew Chief noob deck to Crew Chief good deck almost entirely to him. If you want more Crew Chief stuff, his channel is where you should go. And those are my 5 Crew Chief builds. I knew this deck would be popular, so I kept it off the polls for a while, but I'm starting to reach the last decks here, so I had to do it eventually. Speaking of the perk deck polls, the next one will be up soon enough, but before that, let's quickly go over how I would change the deck. I usually only do this section for decks that are underperformers, which Crew Chief absolutely isn't. However, I just really don't like how this deck works, which is a shame because it presents a lot of unique breakpoints. I think the thing I want changed most about Crew Chief is how you actually support your team. Taking hostages or converts is so easy that it makes you wonder why even play Maniac or Gambler. First off, remove the innate armor and health boost to teammates, alright? Alright. I like the idea of sacrificing yourself for the team, so maybe something like the lower your health and armor is, the more buffs your team will get. For example, every 20 points of health missing is 1% more damage resistance to your team, and every 20 points of armor your build has is 1% less damage resistance to your team. This way, using the goofy Zerk method to get 100% will allow you to give your team 20% damage reduction. However, if you play it with an ICTV, well, that has 238 points of armor, which is to say that 20% reduction turns into 9%. Not shabby, but it's certainly not 20%. Now, if you play this with a suit, well, you're back to a juicy 19%. Although this doesn't necessarily overcome the issue of having buffs forced upon you, I much more respect someone playing an extremely fragile build like 100 Zerk with suit than someone with an ICTV just sitting there like a sack of potatoes with their 2 converts and hostage taker. You may be thinking that this will force Crew Chief into a Zerk only playstyle, but that's not necessarily true. Remember, I didn't take away anything from the person playing Crew Chief. If you want to just give your team some extra stamina while running a powerful 2-shot armor and 2-shot health setup yourself, more power to you. In fact, I believe a change like this will add more variety than it takes away, because like I've shown in this video, Zerk Crew Chief is kinda pointless as it is right now. My change will give it a purpose, as well as leave the original playstyle as a choice. As always with my perk deck suggestions, I haven't tested it, so I can't really say anything more than speculation, but that's just an idea on how I would change the deck. Anyway, yell at me for not liking Crew Chief in the comments, as well as which deck I should put in the polls next, and I'll see you next time.